Okay.
So start whenever you would like.
Okay, thanks. I'm Brett Dolter. I'm an associate professor in economics at the University of Regina. And I want to say good morning to all of you, Honorable Mayor and Council. And I'm here to speak a bit about the research I did, the survey work I did on the energy and sustainability framework. Give a bit of an overview, although I think Kike did a good job of overviewing some of that already. So I had worked with the city to develop some questions to follow up on a survey I ran in 2019. Ran the survey in February and March, and you have some of that data as part of your appendix. I have another version I've just put together, digging a bit deeper into the survey results. You can see them in your appendix, but just to highlight, we asked people, is there support for the city and their operations going to 100% renewable energy? We had 67% of Regina residents supporting that, while 18% opposed. Also asked a bigger question, do you support a citywide 100% renewable energy target? Had 65% of Regina residents agree they supported that, and 19% opposed. Also then dug into specific actions that the city could take to head towards meeting these targets, and found some support there. Kike spoke to some of that, but a few of the highlights: 88% of residents saying they support new homes being built with more insulation, better windows. 87% supporting renovating leisure centers and office buildings that the city owns so they use less energy. 85% of residents support planning new neighborhoods in ways that facilitate walking, cycling, taking transit. And I won't get into every one of these, but there's also support for rapid transit, purchasing electric buses, separate cycling facilities, and designing new neighborhoods so they can use solar. In this survey, we also asked people, renewable target isn't just up to the city, it involves everybody, the citizens and businesses, to all get on board. And so, right now we don't have a lot of adoption of things like solar electric vehicles by private individuals, but there's some potential for growth. So we see that 23% of Regina households would consider installing solar panels. Only 2.3% have installed right now. 28% would purchase electric vehicles. I think the total for Saskatchewan is pretty low right now, so we're in early stages of adoption, but there's a potential for growth there. 14% would consider taking transit, which would be a big boost from our current mode share of around 6%. And 30% would consider cycling regularly, which would be a big jump from the 1.4% that say they currently cycle. So there's willingness to take some action on the part of individuals, and what could help is the city continuing to work towards supporting those actions with policy. So I've offered some recommendations in the report that I uploaded as a delegate today, and I hope you can all get a copy of that. I'll send it if you haven't. Could be supportive policy like the low interest loans that Saskatoon offers through their HELP program, where they will give you some money for solar or a heat pump or energy efficiency retrofits, and you pay it back on your property tax. Could be a policy like holding a higher energy efficiency standard for new buildings in Regina. So Saskatoon has just decided to stay at a tier 2 level of energy efficiency while the rest of the province is sticking at tier 1. Regina could follow Saskatoon's lead and go to that tier 2 and start to look at how do we get to tier 5, which is net zero. And of course, all of these kinds of actions can involve costs. And we asked people if they'd be willing to pay more. I mean, I imagine if you ask most people, do you want to pay more for anything? Probably not a lot of people are going to be a fan of that. But even though no one's really in favor of paying more in this era of inflation, there are still 44% of people who wanted to pay more on their property tax to support the actions.
One
so it's
minute.
Not majority support, but still nearly half of Regina residents. Now, reading the update, it looks like, as Kike has pointed out, some of the actions are not on track to meet the targets. I'm coming from an economics background, and so when I look at this, some of the ideas I have for how to move forward, one would be just to get a roadmap. What's the policy roadmap for each of these actions? What are the supportive things that the city can do to make sure each happens? Lay them out and lay out a sequence.
Seconds.
And another that you could do is, I think the city's very good at considering the costs and the implications of actions on the mill rate, but think about the benefit side too. And so in economics, we use the social cost of carbon. If we use that social cost of carbon in decision making, we actually weigh that damage done to the climate in the full picture. We get a sense of the whole net benefit of a project. If we did that, gasoline we'd value at $2 a liter, not $1.35. Natural gas, $20 a gigajoule, not $6 a gigajoule. And electricity would be about twice the cost. So I think those are some of the ideas. Put that in your decision-making framework and make sure you have the staff and funding to move forward. And I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I have Councillor Zakiniak with some questions.
Thank you. So a couple of questions about the survey. So it looks like you conducted this survey 2 times now, once in 2019 and then once this year. Is that right?
Yeah, it's been two surveys asking some of the same questions. The survey was modified this time to try to get at some of those city actions. So 2019 didn't ask about specific actions the city could take, basically just because we ran out of space to fit that in the survey. So in this version of the survey, we asked things about like, do you want to see retrofits to buildings? Do you want to see, cycling infrastructure? So those are new additions to the survey that we didn't ask about in 2019. Okay. So they're not exact, but some of the questions we wanted to word exactly so we could sort of see, where things stood in 2019 and where they stand in 2025.
And then are there plans for you to continue to conduct this survey, or you don't know at this time?
I'd be happy to. I mean, I think it'd be really interesting to run an update, maybe every 5 years is a good increment to see how things are shifting and where sentiments lie, and also get a sense of where people are at. We can see this is a bit of a baseline now for how many people are, interested in electric vehicle, interested in cycling, and so we can use it as a baseline to see, what is that going to look like in 5 years. Hopefully we'll see some progress. I mean, more and more car companies are starting to look at lower cost electric vehicles, so we probably will see some shifts in the coming years. And yeah, I think it'd be useful. I'd be happy to continue working on this. I find it interesting. So yeah, funding allowing, we'll run it every 5 years.
Okay. And then can you just speak a bit to, you talked about, there was a piece that talked about diverse representation and trying to ensure that within your sample size that you had diverse representation from our city. Can you just speak to that a bit more? To how did you do that? Like, how can we ensure that, or how did you ensure that the survey respondents represented the diverse perspectives throughout our city?
Yeah, so the goal was to have a representative survey. So to do that, we had to do a few things. One was to have enough people respond. So we had 453 Regina residents who completed the survey. Another is to have them contacted randomly. So hired a survey firm called Prairie Research Associates out of Manitoba. They would dial people's cell phone or landline. They dialed both, and they dial until someone was willing to participate in the survey. But we also wanted to make sure we had representation of people who might be harder to reach. So for example, youth might be less likely to take the time to do a survey if they're called, or less likely to pick up their phone. So we had minimum requirements for how many of these harder to reach groups had to be reached. So the survey firm just had to keep calling until they reached those minimum thresholds. We didn't want to be underrepresenting anybody, so we didn't want to weight them by more than 2 times. So if a certain group was 10% of the population, we wanted at least 5% of the survey respondents to be from that group. So when we weight it, it's not weighted more than twice.
Great. And then with the policy recommendations that you've included as part of the results, did you have a chance to discuss those with administration and get any feedback from them? Also wondering if they are planning, is that administration who will consider and potentially move on those, or is that a council direction that would be required? I don't know if you know.
Yeah, so with the collaboration with the city, the work with the city was to define the survey questions, make sure I was asking things that were relevant, that would inform the city's work. And then what I offered to the city was to have that data. So offered the data to the city and did an internal presentation a few months ago. After that, I've developed a more public-facing version of the report. Recommendations on there aren't vetted by the city. So those are, I try to have a little disclaimer that opinions are not those of anyone but the authors. So no, I'd like a conversation. I mean, it'd be great to have a conversation with administration or council on those recommendations. And I'm happy to keep working on this. So we also asked people, would you participate in follow-up research? Both in 2019 and in 2025, about a third of people, so about 150 people each time, said they'd continue to participate. So that's an opportunity to follow that group and ask them more questions with surveys, have some focus groups. Actually had a big planned event for 2020. It was going to have this big in-person dialogue session at City Hall, scheduled for April 2020. Didn't happen, of course, because of the pandemic. Yeah. But that was going to be conducted with city staff there as facilitators, and happy to now maybe revisit that idea so that we can continue to dig into, like, not just what do people think, but why do they think these things? What are the barriers to any of these given actions?
Okay, and so for the folks who said they'd be willing to continue to be a part of additional research, so you've captured their information and you're willing to continue following up with these folks?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and happy to collaborate with the city staff and with direction from council on interesting questions you'd like us to ask.
Cool, great, thank you.
Next up, I have Councillor Flores with some questions.
Thank you for coming today. I just have one question. Earlier you spoke about some of the positive economic impact of addressing climate change, and it's not just about immediate savings. Could you please elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so this fall I'm teaching a class, cost benefit analysis, and public policy making. I think it's good practice to look at the costs and benefits of any given policy or project. So we can look at other levels of government to see how they'll evaluate different policies and programs. If you look at federal regulatory legislation, they'll always have a big regulatory impact assessment statement that includes all of the costs, but also all the benefits. So, I mean, if I take an example today, you're talking about purchasing the diesel buses. So I think there's a pretty good accounting of the costs of what that will cost. In a cost benefit analysis, you'd also include for every option, what are the benefits? So what's the savings in terms of air quality improvement? What's the health benefit? What's the reduced emissions? And then economists, we love to put numbers on all this stuff. And so there's ways to put numbers on that. Social cost of carbon is a way to put damage cost on every ton of greenhouse gas emissions. In 2025, that's $271 a ton. And that's where I get that number of saying, if you want to take a whole society view, then you would actually value gasoline at $2 a liter, natural gas at $20 a gigajoule, and that actually would shift probably some of the thinking on what projects are economic. I think there's a difference between a financial analysis that looks at the private costs to the city and an economic analysis which looks at private costs and also social costs and social benefits. So it's increasing that scope, and I think as an economist that's good practice for a government. Governments aren't like a business. Like people will say, let's run our government like a business. But I mean, you're not there to make a profit. You're there to serve the community and offer services that increase, safety, health, well-being. And so those are aspects that can be captured and they can be put into numbers so that you get a better sense of how to rank projects. And so that's my recommendation here is get a sense of all the different things you can do that comprehensive analysis, but that'll start to help ranking. What are the priority projects? Where's the biggest bang for our buck? What's going to have the biggest net benefit of the things we can do at the city? You have limited budgets. There's always pressure to keep your mill rate low. So looking at that comprehensively, like what are the different actions? What's the... Thanks.
Okay, I have Councillor Rasevich.
Some aspects, we get better in certain ways, more faster in some areas than other areas. Like I think buildings and retrofits and different things like that. I guess in terms of, I guess my question is, when I knocked on doors in Ward 1, I asked the question about, geothermal. I asked the question about electric buses. I didn't have as many questions as you had because I didn't have that much time per house. But when I asked those questions, the majority, that's where when I read your survey, I was like, the majority of people in my ward, they were, with the electric buses, like with technology, they were like, no. With geothermal, they were no.
Can you
Because
ask
the tech-
a question,
So the question,
please?
I guess the question is, I guess my question is, I just find it, my question is, with your survey, the discrepancy between, your numbers and the numbers when I door knock. I find, I don't know how to phrase that into a question, but, I'm wondering, I'm trying to figure out the discrepancy. Like when I knock on doors, the majority of people are saying no.
So is your question, what
Yeah.
is the discrepancy?
Yeah, like,
Okay.
I-
That-
Yeah, let me, I want to look, so we have we have the 453 respondents, and I wanted to look at, I looked at it by ward to see like, is there wards that stick out as being quite different? And so when I look ward by ward, we still see the average response to like the 100% renewable goal is support. There's no ward where the average is opposition. I think the answer I'd give, why the random representative sample is going to give you a better understanding of a population than like an individual and how many times you ask that question, or there could be differences by block, but
I'll tell you, I talked to more than 500 people. Probably talked to 1,000, 2,000, maybe, yeah, like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I know.
I don't know. I assume that they'd all have cell phones and landlines. They'd be able to respond to the survey.
Yeah. No, it's just, I find that, to me, I'm representing a ward, and I'm representing a bunch of people in my ward, and also I'm looking at costs, right? And now you have to, anyways, I think of some more questions.
Yeah. Happy to explore too. I mean, we could do a survey of Ward 1 with 500 people.
One electric bus saves 8 cars a year. 8 cars a year.
Question, please?
Okay.
Okay. No? Any more questions?
No, I'm done for now.
Okay,
I'll try to think of some
Counselor
more.
Sickless?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks for your presentation, Brett. Important research. What does it cost to do one of these things?
The survey cost is about 20,000. And then, I mean, for this project, had support from the city of, I want to say it's about 25,000. So that was for the survey. They actually pay the Prairie Research Associates and some funding for a research assistant. But my time is, pro bono, I guess, I'm a salaried employee of the university. So it'd be tough to replicate if you tried to get a private firm to do the whole thing, because they probably have to pay the guy doing the figures and putting it all together. So that's the, to actually get the data though, you could probably get the data for 20,000.
Okay, and the city paid for all of that then, in this case?
The city paid for the data, yeah. So
Okay.
that's why the city, was delivered that data.
How do you choose PRA? Were there a number of finalists? And
Yeah, so we had a bid, a process where we requested quotes from different firms. Prairie Research Associates came in lower for what they're offering, which is this representative sample approach. Other firms for that same approach would have cost more.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it's a long time ago that I took stats classes, but if you wanted to get that 4.6% error rate down to 1, how big does the sample size need to be? Anyone have a calculator?
It's pretty big. It's pretty big.
Yeah,
like
in the thousands probably.
Yeah, like you, usually you're happy if you get to that level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And have you been asked to do more surveys on behalf of the city?
Not currently, no. I just did this one. I mean, it was a follow-up to a survey that I had run already, so it sort of, I think, made sense to try to do that same survey again, or some version of it.
And have you compared this with other cities?
I haven't compared it to other cities, no.
Okay. That's it. That's all I had to ask. Thank you.
Thanks.
Counselor Buzo?
and providing the data that you did on your survey and providing your kind of your knowledge of economics behind it. A couple questions I do have to ask, and what really triggered is the fact that you're an economics professor, but your survey does not discuss economics. It asks some loosely defined questions in there, but there's no economic correlation to your questions. For example, to what extent do you support or oppose the city of Regina worker insured vehicles, electric, and everything else? But if I said to the same question and reframed it, are you in support of electric buses and it's going to cost you, $150 million, yes or no? There's no correlation to any economics in your survey based upon, a supply and demand curve. We only have so much supply of money and there's so much demand. So we have to balance these things out. But your survey doesn't take into account supply and demand. It does not, like taxation and spend, or it does not take into account how much this will cost. How come you're not including basic economics in your surveys?
So I think there's two things you could do. One, you'd have to have, this is what I'm suggesting would be useful for the city, is to have a catalog of here's all the different things the city can do, here's the cost, and here's the benefit. So I don't know if those numbers exist yet. I think in the framework update, I kind of see a sense of where things are in terms of close to target, but I don't think there's a cost on every item. And I wasn't aware of the bus cost until I read the appendix to this council meeting or executive committee meeting. So I don't think that all of those numbers are yet public or that analysis has been done. There's a value, I think, to asking people where they stand on something, and then there's a value to the next step, which is to say, here's what's possible for the city, here's the costs and benefits, and when that analysis is done, let's make sure it's comprehensive. So I think what I see, like today's discussion of the buses, is a cost analysis, but we don't see health benefits in there. We don't see climate benefits monetized in there. So that's what I'd like to see from an economics perspective is not just the cost. I mean, if we were just talking about like, let's minimize costs, like the city could just cut everything and not have any services. But it's not just about cutting costs. It's how are we gonna offer the services people want at the lowest cost, at the best cost, best bang for your buck. So I think this work had value, and I think there's value in what would be follow-up work to look at what are the actions, what's their net benefit, and then use that to prioritize action.
So are you saying the city should do that, or would that be part of, someone with an economics training to do that? So for an example, transportation systems in Canada is about 35% of our greenhouse gas emissions, and that's 1.4% of what? Yeah, I got a question here. 1.4% of the carbon emissions in the world, and about one city bus works out to X amount of 0.000005. Right? There's an economic cost. We can actually target that, but the question still comes down to how come you never correlated costs into the survey? It's just the questions without correlating the actual costs for actually doing this. So from an economics perspective, the cost of the bus, the cost of an EV, how many EVs are on the road, or how many.
Question, please.
That is a question. How many vehicles are on the road that the city operates in fleet. Here's your cost to transitioning over. How come those numbers are not part of the survey to make it more holistic and complete?
I think that'd be an interesting exercise for follow-up research. We've got these people willing to participate in follow-up research, and so if we can bring them in to do, focus groups, work a bit on, here's some costs, here's some alternatives. Let's evaluate those and see what people think. Let's look at the trade-offs. I think that'd be useful. I mean, really, part of what we had was we have to get every survey completed in less than 15 minutes. Part of the cost of the survey is how long is it going to take. So there's always pressure to keep it as short as possible. But I think that those are good things to explore, and I'd welcome being part of exploring those in future work.
I 100% agree. I'm going to say that, Councillor Raspich about talking to more than 500 people in my ward at the same time when I was talking to more than 500 people. I see your survey results have 54.7%.
Question, please.
54.7% say no to essentially tax increase. What do you think that if you tagged a number to it, an actual tax increase to each one of your comments or questions, what do you think that rejection rate on taxation would be?
Well,
Would it be higher than 54%?
Well, so I think that's where this needs to be put into a context. So I think you could probably ask that question of any city service. How much are people willing to pay to have 10 more police officers? How much are people willing to pay to have one more fire truck? Like, you ask those questions. I'm not sure if that really is how you want to make decisions, though. I think you want to be able to say this is our priority for safety, for keeping our citizens healthy, and we have this goal. So how do we meet that cost effectively? So I wouldn't necessarily think that that's the best way to make decisions, is to sort of say, how should we define our goals piecemeal? I think as a council, city council in the previous iteration has a goal, has a plan. And so now I think it's a matter of looking at what are the steps the city can take to support meeting those, and to make sure, that they're economic. So what's the most cost effective? How are you going to get the most bang for your buck? And I think that work's important. So once you define a goal, which I think the city had done, what's the most cost effective way to meet that goal?
Yeah. How would you say, you've said some of these points in here, how would you provide funding for some of these points that you have described in your survey? What would your suggestion be? If I'm asking you from an economics perspective, you have a whole bunch of points and a whole bunch of questions. How would you say, as a city councillor, here's some of your funding that you could look at doing? Like, what would you suggest?
Well, yeah, so a couple things. I mean, cities are cash constrained, and so you're looking to other levels of government for support. I understand that's part of what made the electric buses possible, is you had federal government support. So continuing to look for that level of support from various levels of government can help with these. I think this is where I come back to, like, you've got to have a kind of a budgetary approach. So there's a goal to be met. What is the commitment to meet that goal? What's the funding that can be allocated? And then using that funding, what can be done? But some of these actions might not be very costly. You could encourage electric vehicle uptake by making it free to park an electric vehicle at a city meter. That'll have some cash implications, but it might not be very much. And you might then help encourage private citizens to buy electric vehicles. So I think that's where you've got to look at what are the different actions, what are the benefits, what are the costs, and then what is the city able to fund? That climate gets treated as sort of an extra add-on. You can just cut as needed. I don't think we treat public core to the mission of the city, and I think that's, as a society, where we need to get with climate, is realizing, it's core to our security and our future to deal with this issue. You also have today the climate adaptation plan, which shows us some of the costs of not acting. So there's a cost to acting. There's also an even larger cost to, there's a cost to acting, but there's an even larger cost to not acting. Catherine Hayhoe is a climate scientist. The way she phrases it is, we can either mitigate, so lower emissions, we can adapt, or we can suffer, and our future is going to be some mix of those three. And so you have today your energy and sustainability framework, which is your mitigation, you have your adaptation plan, and if we don't do either of those, we're going to have even more suffering. So, I don't think we question, should we have a police service? That's just, we understand we need police for public safety. We also should get to the point where we realize we actually need to mitigate, and for our own future. So I think that's the change I think that needs to happen in the conversation. So this isn't treated as a sort of add-on, a kind of nice to have that gets cut at every opportunity.
Oh, 100% agree. No, it just comes down to that supply and demand curve for where we sit. So it really comes down to how much would we ask our taxpayers to bear for more, or do we give something up? What would your suggestion be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's where the analysis needs to be. What are the things we could do? What do they cost? And what are the trade-offs involved? So I think making that a part of the budget deliberation is important, but making sure it's part of the deliberation that people understand there's value to those actions.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, we have Councillor Mancinelli.
Thank you, through the chair. I appreciate the data. I'd like to tap your economist hat for a question. I hope it's not out of bounds. You had some real good costs on the cost of natural gas or gasoline in an equation with a carbon element to it. I was wondering if you have any insight or any maybe a value to concrete. I remember through my learnings on this that to build a new building compared to retrofitting, if it's a 10-story building, the concrete used, you can heat that building for 40 years to displace the carbon emitted for building it. So I'm wondering, I think carbon was the biggest piece of that equation, or concrete was the biggest piece of that equation. Do you have a measurable on concrete that you can share?
I could get you one. I don't have it off the top of my head. But yeah, concrete and steel, I think, are each either 4% or 8% of global emissions. So there's a lot of carbon embodied or generated in the process of creating concrete, and like a ton of CO2 per ton of concrete or something like that. So yeah, whenever you can retain a building's value and keep that concrete working, I think that is a way to save on embodied emissions, not having to redo it and pour new concrete. Okay. And the concrete, I mean, the thing about it is it's the process to generate the clinker. In the process of separating the limestone, you generate CO2 as a byproduct. You could capture that, like the carbon capture process. You could capture that and store it, but no one's really doing that in Canada yet.
Okay. And just to finish my understanding, the cost of installation as well, between all the equipment, the mixers and everything else along the chain to get that concrete to a finished form to go onwards is all part of that equation. Is that correct?
You could figure that out. I'm not sure if the sort of 1 ton to 1 ton might just be the production side of it.
Oh, so it even grows as you lay it?
Could be, yeah.
Okay. I think not. Thank you.
Yeah, and I could go and I can get you better numbers, make sure I have the correct numbers.
I think as long as I know that I'm not whistling Dixie or crazy, I got enough data to work with as a mechanic, but I appreciate that I'm not in the wrong vein. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any further questions for our delegation? Okay. Seeing none, thank you so much for your presentation and your knowledge. You can return to the gallery.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Amy Schneider. And I'll just